Welcome one and all to the Hammer Territory Podcast. My name is Shawn Coleman. Hope wherever you are and wherever you are listening, you have had a happy, healthy, and wonderful holiday season. A very late Merry Christmas to all of our listeners. An early Happy New Year. We're kind of in, not necessarily the dead zone, but that zone where it's kind of relaxation. You don't have a lot going on. You're still around friends and family, still in the festive mood with the holidays and everything else. But you know what? We're also in the midst of the baseball offseason, and we're covering a team that's done a lot, but likely is not done. So we still have plenty to talk about. And as always, one of the best when it comes to breaking down the Braves, my podcast partner, Stephen Tolbert. Hope you and your family had a wonderful Christmas, sir. As always, good getting to talk with you.
What's up, buddy? Yeah, we are in this, in between two major holiday kind of dead zone, where most of the time stuff doesn't happen. Like on Christmas Day, we did get I think the A's signed Tyler Soderstrom to a big extension. I remember a couple of years ago, this is the time period the Braves traded for Chris Sale. It was like the last day of the year. So like stuff does happen at this time, but it's exceedingly rare. A lot of front offices spend most of this time off, the week between Christmas and Christmas and New Year's. So I'm not expecting much. I was hoping we'd get a big flurry right before Christmas, but we didn't really get that. Still a lot of big name free agents on the board. I did an update on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, and like only 2 of the top 10 free agents have signed. A lot of the middle of the class has signed, but the top of the class is still on the board. So a lot to still happen this offseason. And again, with the Braves have probably done more heavy lifting than just about any other team. But as we've said, and as we're going to talk about on this show, doesn't mean they're done. There could still be more coming. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and in my opinion, as a matter of fact, with what they've done already, it means even more that they shouldn't be done, right? There's levels to what we've talked about. Me and you have talked extensively about getting that difference maker on the offensive side, but instead they filled needs. They've made smaller moves, but they've enhanced the significance of those smaller moves by continuing to make those moves, by continuing to fill those needs. Individually, signing a Mike Yastrzemski or a Hassan Kim or trading for a Mauricio Dubon may not seem like that, important. They're that significant, in a vacuum, in a singular sense on their own, but collectively, you see how this team has improved. But that, again, shines the spotlight on why this team definitely needs to go after a starting pitcher, and to that point, a significant starting pitcher, because that's where they can make their difference, right? That's where they can truly become, one of the elite staffs in baseball. And you still have plenty of starting options out there. I know that Scott and Brad had talked about it, but Framber Valdez, Zach Gallen, Ranger Suarez, Aime from Japan, Chris Bassett, among others. There are some significant options that are out there. The Braves have money with all they've done so far. To me, that makes it make even more sense to go and be aggressive in adding that starter sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I mean, a splash is still out there. Like if you want to make that was the point of, most of the top 10 is still unsigned, and that's not just the Braves. Any team out there can still go make a significant splash for 2026 if they want to. If you listen, Kyle Tucker is going to change somebody's entire outlook of their offseason. Framber Valdez is going to change somebody's entire outlook. Ranger Suarez, there's still guys, Zach Gallen, Cody Bellinger is still going to change somebody's offseason pretty dramatically. So, when so much of the top of the class is still unsigned, like even though a lot's happened already this offseason, not as much as we want and certainly not at the pace we want, but still a lot has happened. And as much as has happened, there's still significant updates and significant improvements that are going to be made by multiple teams. So, even though we're, more than halfway through this offseason, in a lot of ways, the biggest moves are yet to come. And like like we're about to talk about, especially on the pitching side, where I agree with you, I think the Braves can make the biggest splash, even though we did get a position player kind of update for the Braves. That was a bit surprising that we're going to talk about. I agree with you. The starting pitcher is where you can really go cement a fantastic offseason if you go add one more impact player at that position, then you can really say the Braves had a top to bottom, every single aspect, every single hole they had on the team, they really went out and filled aggressively. And I would feel really good about the offseason if they went out and added one more significant starter to their group.
Yeah, and to expound on why it makes sense, the part of this team again, something that I want to point out from the beginning of 2024 through the midst of 2025, even for most of that part, we were disappointing as a team. We still had arguably the best starting staff in baseball. I go to the middle of 2025 because that's where we really, that was around the time where Swellenbach and Sale and others, started getting injured and out for an extended period of time. But the one aspect of our team that has been closest to a level that you need to contend is starting pitching. And that's why I think it's worth adding a significant difference maker who also is durable. Durability is a big thing. And it's also with all the options that we mentioned that are out there, all it costs is money, right? That's all that it's going to cost. It's not going to cost you prospects. Now, you could go trade for a controllable arm, but you probably want, proven ability, you want durability. And to me, that shines the spotlight on one individual above others, who I think the Braves could get to a level of comfort with this individual more than others could because of the connections that they have. And that's Framber Valdez. I wrote a piece over at batterypower.com just because when you really look at Framber Valdez, one of the things that's unique about him that probably is not necessarily there so much with others is that you had the incident last year during the season where he crossed up his catcher, or there's speculation that he crossed up his catcher in the midst of a game. That definitely did not have, the most positive reaction around baseball. I don't think 1 10-second occurrence defines, a free agent's profile, especially above their production. But I mention that, though, because there may be character concerns that are out there when it comes to Framber Valdez. Well, former Braves assistant general manager Dana Brown is the Astros general manager. The Braves just signed Martin Maldonado, who's one of the closest relationships Framber Valdez has in the industry to support the major league franchise. One of the reasons why I feel the Braves could make a move for Framber Valdez, you've got two reliable resources that can give you all that you need to know about whether or not Framber is a good fit for this team. We know that Alex Anthopoulos really vets, thoroughly explores every aspect of a player before he adds them. He's got two pretty close sources to explore on Framber if he wanted to add them. That, to me, may be the biggest obstacle, because after that, when you come to the profile that Framber Valdez has, he's almost identical to Max Fried, who you know better than anybody. Durability, has thrown one of the highest inning totals of anybody over the past 20 years. And he has thrown more playoff innings than anybody since 2020 as well. He checks all the boxes. And with the age that he's at, if those concerns are out there character-wise, he may be in a contract range you'd be comfortable with as well. Framber Valdez, to me, is the best singular source that can check as many boxes as you want to add to our rotation.
Yeah. And listen, you can call up Mauricio Dubon and say, hey, you just played with him for the last 5 years. What kind of guy is he? How is he viewed in the clubhouse? Last year the Braves and the Astros got together on the Rafael Montero deal. I think he came from the Astros. So these are organizations that talk a lot, obviously. Made a trade last year, made a trade this year. So like you said, Alex will know exactly what he needs to know to decide whether or not Framber Valdez should be a part of this organization. There will be no shortage of information. And if he calls and he gets, hey, that incident with the catcher was a one-time thing. He was very frustrated. I think he'd just given up a grand slam. I think him and the catcher were on the wrong page. It was just it wasn't a good moment for him, not making excuses. It was a bad moment, but it was isolated. He's been an upstanding citizen before that and since then. Or he's going to make all his phone calls. He's going to learn this guy's an asshole. You don't want this guy on your rod. This guy should not be on your team. And any hint of that, not even words that strong, any hint of that, and Alex is probably going to say no, especially for the money that you're talking about, I mean, if he gets what he's projected to get, which is like 5 years and 30 million a year, um, you can't have even a hint of the guy is not a good teammate, because he's all of a sudden going to be the highest paid player on your team. And you want to talk about something that could blow up quickly. So yeah, there's no doubt in my mind, Alex has plenty of resources to go do all the due diligence that you have to do anytime there's even the hint of character questions. But I'll say this, if there were character questions, I don't think I would hear about his market being as strong as I've heard his market being. Like, if these were real and there were multiple incidents and there were multiple teammates saying, do not sign this guy, you do not want this guy in this clubhouse, I don't think his market would be as strong as it is, because everything I've heard about his market is, that 5-year 150 number that got thrown out early is either on the money or it might even be low. So my guess is it was probably more of an isolated incident, but we don't know. I mean, we don't know, but Alex will know. I promise you. Alex has got plenty of connections, plenty of people he can talk to, including his brand new utility player that he just traded for, to figure out who Framber Valdez is. And I'm not going to pretend to be able to sit here and tell you exactly. I have no idea what kind of person he is, what kind of character he has. And that is probably a big sway on whether or not I would give him this contract or not. If it was just about production on the field, I would have very little reservation, other than I don't like giving pitchers 5-year deals. If you could somehow get him for a 4-year deal, it would be even better. But, that stuff we just don't have access to, and we won't know until after. And we may never know specifically with Valdez if the Braves did their due diligence and it just came back too negative for them to continue. That's stuff we rarely get an inside look into, but Alex has no shortage of ways to find that information out. And whatever answer he gets will, I promise you, dictate very strongly their next move, whether it's continuing down the road with Framber or moving on to the next guy.
And there are plenty of options out there. The other part of this is that, is I think that I've lightened up a bit on it, just because we've been able to fill so many needs without giving up prospects, is the aspect of, listen, if we're going big game hunting when it comes to adding the starting pitcher, that likely means that 26th pick is going to be given up. Me and you both, at one point we're like, let's keep that, let's trade for what we need, but they haven't, and they've not given up any prospects. If the market for these starting pitchers that are out there with the draft pick tied to them is going on as long as it is, I know that the markets could be strong, but once the first guy signs, maybe those contracts come down a bit. If you get a really good contract opportunity with the Suarez or a Gallen or a Valdez, it's going to sting at first, I think. But I think the Braves are okay doing it. I think they would be okay giving up that pick. And the more I think about it, if we truly are going to go with starting pitching as our way of being kind of over the top of where we're going to be elite and we can win now, I'm a bit more okay with it than it was, even a few weeks ago.
And even like a Chris Bassett, would not piss me off in any way, shape, or form. Like, I know people want the big name, but just some durability, just some extra depth. And again, Bassett wouldn't cost the draft pick, so you would be able to get through your entire offseason and still maintain your entire draft, even though you got unlucky with getting the 9th overall pick. That certainly could have been better. But yeah, if you sign a guy like Bassett and you just go with depth. I understand the Braves' logic though of and we've heard this, that they are aiming very large, and if they don't get it, then they might just rely on the depth they have. I do understand that logic to an extent, and I applaud them for being as aggressive as they've been. Payroll is at a level we have not seen ever, and apparently there's still more to spend. So you have to give them credit for that, and I understand the logic of trying to get one of these big guys that can directly impact a playoff series. But I think even a guy like Bassett could help a playoff series, even if it's like, Scott said this the other night, and I agreed with him. Like, can impact a playoff series has levels. Like, you could send Chris Bassett out for a one time through the order, for the first 3 innings of a playoff game. Would you send him out for the, 5th, 4th, 5th, and 6th inning? Probably not. But there are plenty of guys the Braves could still sign that aren't Framber Valdez that could help in a playoff series. So that would not upset me. It wouldn't be quite the same level of offseason as getting one of these top guys, but just any pitching depth at all, I'm going to be happy with, because you just can't have enough. And I don't think the Braves currently have enough. And we've all said that from day one, that we want a starter, and they've done a really good job adding to bullpen. Go get a starter, and you can feel really good about this offseason.
And speaking of pitching depth, and I agree with you, Chris Bassett level signing, probably would not be, that can only be viewed as a positive. But the one thing that I will say is that I don't think anybody needs to, tell Alex Anthopoulos or tell anybody that listens to Alex Anthopoulos, how much he values pitching depth. It clearly is a priority, and we got a unique perspective from Foul Territory's own Ken Rosenthal about that last week. A bit more on Ken Rosenthal's latest report on the Braves in just a moment after a word from our partners. So in the week leading up to Christmas, Stephen, Ken Rosenthal, basically every other day writes a great article for The Athletic, and he'll, expand on it in his show Fair Territory, which you can find on the Foul Territory family of podcasts. He talked about the Braves, and, typically he's been talking about the moves that they made and what's to come next. And of course, he's ended up pitching. But he also talked about Ketel Marte. And he talked about the fact that the Braves are not a fit for Ketel Marte because of the fact that they really don't want to give up their young pitching, especially Hurston Waldrop. Now, I want to put a little bit of perspective on this, and I will admit this is speculation on my part. So, Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like the Braves probably checked in on Ketel Marte at some point, due diligence-wise, just like they did with Byron Buxton. His contract would be a great fit. I feel they could have put him at short for a year and then made a decision on, putting him at second, once Ozzie, played another year with us. I feel they would have done that, been just fine with that. I feel like they probably checked in at some point. And the ask, even though the Braves, I think, are one of the better fits to give the Diamondbacks who want young pitching, the Braves could have given a good quantity with some quality to the Diamondbacks for Marte. I feel like the Braves just did not want to give the young pitching up. Now, that may not necessarily be the most effective way of go about doing things. But I think that what it came down to was that the Braves probably talked with the Diamondbacks about Ketel Marte. Not only was it not the cleanest fit, it probably was a bit too rich for their blood, and they just pivoted towards, instead of making the home run move like they potentially would have with going after Buxton, they quickly maneuvered to just fill needs with high floor type guys. Is that kind of the read that you have on it? And then from there, I want to talk a bit more about what this could indicate as far as future moves, not necessarily this off season, but maybe into the season for the Braves.
So my read on this Ketel Marte stuff is, one, he is one of the best players in baseball.
Absolutely.
He's on a, relative to his talent level, he's on a dirt cheap contract with multiple years of team control. I think he makes like $14 million a year or something, like $15 million a year, something like that. Not that dissimilar to the Buxton deal, but I think it's even longer than the Buxton deal. He is on the older side. I think he's 32, but still he's one of the best players in baseball.
Yes.
The Diamondbacks are not the biggest payroll team in the world. Everybody knows that. So, and Diamondbacks are trying to win. So, like when I first saw it, I was thinking, why are the Diamondbacks so eager to get rid of Ketel Marte? Like, this guy is one of the best players in baseball. You don't get guys like that at $14 million a year very often. They're trying to win. I don't really get why they're trying to get rid of him. And then you start reading, and like, apparently there's a lot of people in that organization that just don't like Ketel Marte.
Yeah.
There's been some locker room stuff. And I'm not going to pretend to know the ins and outs. We don't cover the Diamondbacks, and so we don't live in this stuff every day, but there's just a lot of smoke that he's kind of worn out his welcome there, to be quite honest. That's one of the only reasons, unless the guy is actively demanding a trade, and maybe he is, you don't really trade what is essentially your best player. I think it's fair to say Ketel Marte. I mean, I know Corbin Carroll is awesome, and you could probably make that argument, but one of your two best players on a dirt cheap contract on a team that's trying to win, unless the guy has kind of worn out his welcome. And so if you told me that alone was the reason the Braves aren't a fit, I would believe it. Now, we'll never know exactly. I guarantee you Alex checked in. He checks in on everybody. You're not doing your job if you're not at least making the phone call. But again, like same thing with Framber. Like if there's any hint that this guy is going to be a pain in the ass to manage, especially when you have a brand new man, not a brand new manager. I mean, Walt Weiss has managed before, but he's a new manager to you. You don't want to make his life any more difficult than it already is with bringing in guys who are going to be clubhouse problems. Now, I don't know Ketel Marte. That might be an unfair statement to say that he's a clubhouse problem. It might be something on the Diamondbacks end where, like, they did something that kind of pissed him off. I have no idea. We're not in that world. But there has just been a lot of smoke that he is something in that clubhouse is not working, whether it's him, whether it's them, I don't know. So my guess is I think the Braves would give up some of this young pitching. Now, I don't know if they'd give up Hurston Waldrop, but I think they would certainly give up some of it to make a trade. I think they would have definitely given it up for Buxton. But I don't think they're willing to give it up and take on a potential clubhouse problem. I think they'll do one of those. I don't think they would do both. So that's my read on Marte. Anytime somebody that good, who's that cheap, is being like actively shopped, I'm always curious because that's usually one of the only reasons a guy like this gets traded is because he makes too much money. You're trying to clear it. That's not Marte. He makes, nothing relative to his talent. So I just assume there's something wrong in the clubhouse. We'll see where he gets moved to. I've heard the Mets. I've heard a bunch of teams, but if that stuff is true, and I'm not saying it is, but if it is true, I don't expect the Braves to be involved. And I think they would give up the pitching if that wasn't a big question, but I don't think they would do both.
That's a very fair point, right? And I think that, you're correct in that the clubhouse fit has to be there, and everybody knows that the Braves put a high value on that. It does, though, kind of, also shine a spotlight on the fact that we talk about the Braves' current starting rotation. Strider, Sale, Swellenbach, Ronaldo Lopez, if they add another starter, Hurston Waldrop, so on and so forth. We talk about how quality that has been. But just like we also talked about last year, it could be that in theory. But there remains a lot of question marks, right?
Yeah.
Like and not only in terms of what you're going to get from those pitchers this year, but what are they going to look like after this year? Like, what are they going to look like for 27 and beyond? We don't necessarily know what version of Strider we're going to get. We hope that we get what he once was, but what does that look like if he's not? Sale, I imagine that they're probably, you've been an advocate of this. I imagine they'll probably, look to keep him around, beyond 26. But just naturally, a decline could happen at any point. I think Swillenbach is a top of rotation option. I think that makes sense. Ronaldo Lopez, you'd love to see him get back to being a reliable starter, but that shoulder, as long as it's barking, you just don't know. What is Hurston Waldrop going to look like second, third time through the league? These are natural questions you could bring up about any rotation, but I think for Alex Anthopoulos, who is seen multiple years now of not having quality pitching depth be there like he wanted, that's why he's always has been, but that's why he probably is a bit more resilient. In a year from now, you could have Hurston Waldrop, you could have a healthy A.J. Smith-Shawver, J.R. Ritchie, Cam Caminiti. You could have a very attractive depth cupboard of young pitching. I think that Alex Anthopoulos probably does put a bit more value on having that available now than he did in the past. But I agree with you. Say midseason something comes up, he could pivot to still add another significant offensive piece if the offense needs it.
And I'll say one more thing about the Braves and Marte. So my first answer was focused mostly on Marte and the Diamondbacks. From the Braves' perspective, I was thinking about this the other day. They technically do not have a middle infielder on a guaranteed contract after this year. Mauricio Dubon has got 1 year of team control left. 2026 is his last year of arbitration. Hassan Kim obviously just signed a 1 year deal. And Ozzie Albies has already passed the guaranteed portion of his deal. He's just on these club options. It's kind of a year-to-year club option thing. Now, he does have the buyout, which I guess technically is guaranteed money, but it's a buyout. It's not a guaranteed year contract. So that's basically the Braves' three main middle infielders, and all of them could be gone after this season. So, it wouldn't surprise me at all to see the Braves at some point try to address some sort of long-term answer somewhere in the middle infield. Some of that's going to depend on Ozzie, quite honestly. Like Ozzie is a very clear candidate if he has a bounce back year for signing an extension of some sort, but he's got to show something. You got to show us that you're not just completely done as a major league player. Like he's looked for a concerning amount of time where all of the skills have basically declined at a rapid pace. And now he's already dealing with the wrist, thumb injury, whatever it is that he's going to be, he ended last year with. Ha-Seong Kim, well, again, a 1-year deal. I'm guessing he signed that 1-year deal to have a good year and then get back out and sign a major deal somewhere else. I doubt that's going to be with the Braves. So, like from that perspective, checking on Marte makes sense. Like you don't actually have any long-term answers at shortstop or second base as currently constructed. And I know they just drafted a bunch of shortstops in the last draft, and we'll see what those guys develop. But currently, you don't have a clear answer in your minor leagues either for either one of those spots. So, like this, it's not a question this year because they traded for DeBon and they signed Ha-Seong Kim. But like after this year, the middle infield very kind of quickly has become in totality a big question going forward. Shortstop has always been a question, but now with Ozzie's, inconsistent play and the fact that his contract is through the guaranteed portion, they don't have a long-term answer at shortstop or second base. So from that perspective, I certainly understand checking in on Marte.
And the other thing to remember is that as active as they have been, this offseason, and even though they're probably going to sign another pitcher to a multi-year deal, they position it to where they maintain. I know some people may not want to hear this, but it is a significant development as well. They haven't given up prospects, so they still can be a factor in trades for a significant player, but they also are going to have a lot of money to operate with next offseason.
Yeah.
The bullpen pieces, Bummer and Jimenez and Iglesias, Ha-Seong Kim, just that alone gets you nearly $50 million available. Now, obviously, it doesn't work out to where it's always going to be a clear 50 million. But my point is that they have next offseason to still address it. So you're correct, Stephen. Absolutely. They need to address it. That will become a bigger question as time moves forward when it comes to long-term options up the middle. But thankfully, they do have multiple ways they can go about addressing those in time.
And let me say this. We'll talk about this as it gets closer. We're not ready to do 2026 previews yet. We're still in off-season mode. But just a little nugget that we're certainly going to talk about at some point. Ozzie Albies is going to have to play at a certain level to justify not having Ha-Seong Kim play at second and Mauricio Dubon play at short. Like I'm not sure if Ozzie plays like he did for most of last year. I'm not so sure the Braves' best situation isn't putting Dubon at short, who's a much better defender than Ha-Seong Kim, and putting Ha-Seong Kim at second. Ozzie is going to have to play at a level that convinces the team not to do that, because I think that's a possibility. And I think everybody is just automatically saying Ha-Seong Kim's the shortstop, Ozzie Albies is the second baseman. And that's certainly how they're going to start. But if Ozzie Albies continues to regress at the level he has the last couple of years, I would at least explore putting Dubon at short and putting Ha-Seong Kim at second, because that's certainly a better defensive setup. And if Ozzie's not hitting, it might be a better offensive setup too. So again, that'll be more once we get past January when we start previewing the team for 2026. But I just want to put that little nugget out there. Ozzie's going to actually have to play at a level that justifies him keeping that starting spot.
Yeah, and we're not necessarily, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Stephen. You're not necessarily saying that Ozzie is not going to, not start. But listen,
he's definitely going to start the year as the second baseman.
But listen, we've seen the downside of how these injuries are taking a toll on Ozzie. And no disrespect to Ozzie. Absolutely, I'm speaking for myself here. Absolutely love Ozzie Albies, the person. Love what he does on the field. Like the best version of the Braves is Ozzie being at his best. It absolutely is the truth. But how certain are you're going to consistently get that? That's become a bigger question over the past few years. And when we say that the Braves have added depth and versatility, it's to be able to answer these questions. Okay, we've addressed shortstop, But what if up the middle again, we're one of the worst position groups in baseball? Well, we now have options to make changes, to your point.
Yeah.
So that's what comes with depth. That's what comes with versatility. And even though it may lead to tough results, at the end of the day, the only results that matter, what do the Braves need to turn around to be able to win consistently? And now that they've got some options to where, hey, if you're not playing, at the level that could help us win, we've now got options that potentially, could make it to where you're not playing as much. So it'll definitely be an interesting thing to see. So we talked about the starting pitching options. We've talked about, speculated interest in Ketel Marte. That shows that this offseason, in terms of the roster, in terms of the product on the field, there's still plenty to look forward to. But what about outside of that? What else this offseason are some storylines to potentially pay attention to that could become bigger as we move forward in 2026? A bit more on that in just a moment. So, Stephen, obviously the big storyline that everybody is talking about this offseason, and we will expand on these certain topics in time, but this third segment is more just to kind of give listeners storylines to pay attention to. That obviously is the potential of a lockout, quote unquote, CBA, negotiation window where there's not anything going on in baseball. That looms very large. I believe that the last time we saw this was between the 2021 and 2022 season, the year that Freddie Freeman went to the Dodgers and we traded for Matt Olson. That is a very real possibility. When I say possibility, I mean now, more than 5 years ago, it seems to be an expectation that games will be lost in the 2027 season. That is something that many need to pay attention to, because it could mean a shorter season in 2027, and it could also mean a lot of changes for 2027 and beyond than we currently see in baseball.
Yeah, and listen, it has impact on this offseason because, and I can't remember who said this, it might have been Jeff Passan, but
yes,
if you're signing a guy to a 2-year deal, teams are already factoring in that the second year of that deal is not going to be 162 games. Yeah. Like that's how certain
trade candidates. It was trade candidates in his trade piece. So not only signing them, but trading for
them, right? Like it changes the value. Yeah, you're getting less games. That's how certain people are operating under the idea that there's going to be a lockout and impacted games in 2027. Now we got lucky in when the Braves won the World Series in 2021. Obviously, the lockout happened that offseason. That was the last time the CBA was up for negotiation. And they got the deal done literally just in time to save a 162-game season. If you'll remember, they actually took the first 2 series of the season and put them at the end.
Yes.
Which is why the Braves and the Mets were playing each other for the division title that year. You remember the Braves chased down the Mets, and the second to last series was with the Mets. Well, originally that was supposed to be the first series of the year, or the second series of the year, and it got moved to the end because of the lockout. So they were still able to play 162 last time. There is much less confidence this time that they're going to be able to play 162 games, and you could tie it pretty much all to the Los Angeles Dodgers, because the last 2 years, the Los Angeles Dodgers have outspent everybody damn near 2-1, and they are dominating the sport, and people believe that there needs to be some sort of salary cap, and the players have always been no cap, no question. It's a non-starter. And that alone, there's other issues, but honestly, that alone is the reason why so many people are convinced there's going to be a lockout and it's going to cost games in 2027. And so it does matter. This offseason, it matters. Even though it's a year away, you're signing contracts now for the 2027 season, and they're being impacted by this reality. So yes, there's other storylines we're going to get to that are more pertinent, but you need to be aware as a baseball fan that this is coming down the road. It's coming very quickly, and it is going to have an impact. Not only now, it's going to have an impact at the trade deadline when we get there, and it's certainly going to have an impact once we get to the end of the 2026 season, because a lockout is going to be imminent.
speaking of, the business side of things, another one that, in recent days we've gotten more information on, we've been through over the past couple of seasons a bit of uncertainty. Last off season we, saw, how were we going to be able to watch Braves games via FanDuel, and Amazon picked it up, and it was, seemed like a pretty good solution. Well, now there's been more to that. There's more development when it comes to FanDuel and its future to be able to cover teams across multiple sports. And it certainly seems like now that there's going to be, it's just going to change. FanDuel's not going to be the source, for much longer, depending on, when certain, things happen. Stephen, last off season, you did a wonderful job keeping folks up to date and covering that. But that, once again, I don't necessarily know if it's going to be as big of a storyline to watch, like an update for every week, but it is important to keep in the back of your mind to know where, if a change does occur, where you can go to access Braves games.
Yeah, here we are again. Once again, talking about how people are going to watch games in 2026. Obviously, last offseason, we talked about it extensively. We tried to cover it, wall to wall, because it matters, because people want to know where they can watch games. It matters to the everyday fans. And here we are again. Last year it was Diamond Sports Group who owned all of the RSNs, the regional sports networks. I do want to make a point. People get confused. They think it's FanDuel that owns this stuff. FanDuel literally just bought the naming rights. This has nothing to do with FanDuel, the company.
Yeah.
It's like Truist. I made this point on Twitter. It's like Truist Bank bought the naming rights for Truist Park, but Truist Bank doesn't in any way, shape, or form operate Truist Park.
Yes.
They just bought the name. So FanDuel is just the name. These are the regional sports networks that have been around forever. It was Bally before. It was like Fox Sports Southeast or whatever before that. These RSNs have been around forever, and this business model has been slowly dying for about 15 years now, and I mean slowly dying. And we might be at the final nail, because last offseason, people remember they came out, they were doing this whole bankruptcy court, and if they didn't figure out a way to get out of bankruptcy court, then the Braves, they were going to completely dissolve. Well, they kind of got a life preserver at the last moment. They made it out of bankruptcy court, and everything got to operate the same as normal last season. So, fans got to watch games on FanDuel Sports Network just like normal. Well, we got a report a couple of days ago that the company that ended up being created out of bankruptcy court, which I think is called Main Street Sports or something like that, who now owns these regional sports network, they're a week away from completely dissolving because they have no money. And in the report, it said they've already missed a December payment to the St. Louis Cardinals, who are one of the 14 major league teams that are under these RSNs. The Braves are also one of the 14, which is why this matters to us. And if this company dissolves, if this parent company to these RSNs dissolve, then the Braves TV rights are once again up in the air completely. We have no clue. As I sit here right now, I have no clue where the Braves are going to be on television next year. And that alone makes this a story worth following and tracking. Now, obviously, I do not expect fans to be, diving into the court documents like we were doing last year. We will try to keep people as up to date as we can anytime we get information. But that dropped right before Christmas, that this parent company was a week away from dissolving. There is a potential lifeline out there. There's a London-based company that might buy the whole thing and keep everything status quo. That could happen, and then nothing changes. But just be aware, we are once again on the where are the Braves going to be on TV watch, like we were last offseason. And like last offseason, we will do our very best to keep it up to date. As soon as we get any information, we'll tack it on to, not every show we do, but when it's relevant, we'll tack it on to shows so that where you can watch the Braves next year.
Absolutely. And that's the reason for bringing up these storylines. It's not to, worry listeners. It's not to, be negative, but it's to shed light on not only the fact that, your regular way of watching the Braves could change. You may have to alter that, but also a year from now, we could be talking about, when are the Braves actually going to play? How many games are they going to play? So these two storylines may not necessarily fully complete and be fully defined in 2026, but they certainly are going to continue to evolve. And that's the reason for watching them, to make sure that you're on top of things, which we will be to make sure everybody kind of knows what's going on so that there's no surprises, because at some point in time on both of these fronts, the results that come from this are going to have a major impact on obviously not only how you watch the Braves, but the game of baseball and the future of the game of baseball as a whole.
And one last thing on the TV stuff, just remember the Braves deal with these RSNs runs out in 2027. So this is all under the backdrop of at some point the Braves are going to be free agents and are going to be able to sign a new TV deal anywhere they want, or, and this is what I hope they do, or create their own network and just control it all in-house, which is what most big market teams do. And the Braves are a big market. The Braves have a massive footprint in the TV market of baseball because of how many years they were on TBS and how national their fan base is. They can certainly support starting their own network and just controlling it in-house. Then you're not dealing with RSNs. You're not having to worry about some third corporation, some middleman corporation going under and screwing up everything for you. You just control it all. That's what the Yankees do. That's what the Mets do. That's what the Cubs do. It's what the Dodgers do. Like these big networks have their own, they have their own station. They control it all in-house. I hope that's the direction the Braves go. That's still a couple of years away. First, we got to get through all of this nonsense, but just keep that in mind as well. All of this is on the backdrop of not in the not too distant future, the Braves are actually going to be TV free agents. And, that's going to be a massive storyline when it gets here.
Hey, and with how well the Braves have done with the business model of, the battery, their surrounding areas generating, consistent revenue for this team, which helps support the offseason that we've seen this offseason. You would think if they can get a good, spot going with maybe their own TV deal, if they can find success through them being, free agents in the near future TV wise, that could be just another revenue stream to really keep the finances in place to support a winner long term. Steven, anything else from you as we wrap up this edition of the Hammer Territory podcast?
No, I just want to say Merry Christmas to everybody. You'll probably be listening to this a couple days after Christmas, a couple days before New Year's. So Merry Christmas. Hope everybody had a happy and a healthy Merry Christmas. Hope that everybody has a happy New Year. Obviously, we are going to be here, 2026 is literally on the doorstep. And we are going to be here to cover it just like we were in 2025, just like we were in 2024, going back many years now if you count the old podcast. So, make sure you follow along. I think the Braves might still have a decent sized move left in them. I think the Braves might have a couple of small moves left in them. I don't think they're done. And what we've heard kind of behind the scenes is they're not done. So, make sure you're tuned in. Make sure you get those, anytime something happens, we go live as soon as we can get to a mic. It's usually, maybe an hour later, but we usually try to do an emergency show as fast as possible. So make sure you're subscribed and you get all the new content.
Hey, and you never know, you never know what you're going to get. That's the thing about these Hammer Territory podcasts, that they're gift wrapped at some point in times. With the holiday season be here, you could get a surprise Stranger Things season 5 breakdown from yours truly, along with Steven. You could get the forecast of a college football playoff game. You could even get a breakdown of Stephen Tolbert's favorite Christmas meal that he thinks he can cook, but nobody else actually agrees. But hey, all that speculation is to leave you sitting on the edge of your seat for the next Hammer Territory podcast. For Stephen Tolbert, you can find him at B_outliers on Twitter/X. My name's Shawn Coleman at StatsSAC. Brad and Scott will be with you on Sunday. Hammer Territory across all forms of social media, part of the Foul Territory family of podcasts. Until next time, go Braves. We'll talk to you again soon here on the Hammer Territory podcast.